So I don't need to talk. Let's just have Amy sing. Oh. Who said that? I want names. See, I try to train them, and they're wild. They're wild. So I want to bring you on a little journey today, a journey of clarity. And I want you to imagine like we're crawling up some steps toward a greater development and an understanding of the application of what we're all about. And if you don't want to come on that journey, tough, because I'm going to drag you with me. But the title is Wholeness. Wholeness, such a big, vague title. And I bet you think you kind of understand what that term means. But I want to excavate it a little bit more. I want to personalize it a little bit more. I want to bring some enthusiasm and some new charge to it so you actually sit in awe of what you are. That's my goal, that you're going to be sitting in awe of what you are. And so this all was prompted Wednesday night in a class that I was teaching here. And I had just gotten through talking about one of the seminal ideas of metaphysics, and that is the point that you and I create nothing. And we always talk about that from Ernest Holmes' Science of Mind, from other New Thought writers that teach us that we don't create anything because it's already created. What we are instruments that then access this infinite field of potentiality. We initiate a relationship with what is there. And sometimes it can be hard to get through the jargon and the terminology and language in order to really comprehend what that means. And so I was saying, and I was reiterating the fact that we don't even co-create anything. Actually, what we do is we just say yes to what is. And to the degree of our allowing is the degree in which that which is already created begins to pour in or to use us as a vehicle and an instrument. And so the student says, well, okay, so I'm confused because doesn't the universe continue to expand? And I gave her an answer, and I went home and I wasn't satisfied with the answer that I gave her. So I stayed up all night. No, well, but I sat with it and I thought, you know, I want some deeper clarity, because if she's asking that question, so are other people asking that question. And I began to comprehend and think about the word infinite. And it's foolish for us to even begin to try to describe or define it. It's ageless, birthless, deathless, timeless. It's not the alpha and the omega, because that indicates compartments and boundaries. It's the all. It's the all. Long before there was form, there was the all. Quantum physics calls it the field. In this field, then, is everything. Everything. What's so brilliant about that, if you accept it, is that you are now associated with everything. And to the degree of where you are in your conscious path, with your permission, with your acceptance of that, with your allowing of that, with your enthusiasm regarding that, becomes the collaborative relationship whereby you as the instrument now are letting the download of all that is come in and have free reign to exemplify and to express and to lift and to carry you and to catapult you into new expressions of being, if you're willing. And so infinite, something that's infinite, that's what the all is. And so when Ernest Holmes or Neville Goddard or any of those wise teachers would tell us that creation is finished, they were trying to tell us that you can't put any kind of boundary on that level of field, on that level of creation. It just is. But there's a difference between the word expanded or expanding, because the student said to me, well, isn't the universe constantly expanding? Well, you have to think about the word expanding, because we toss that word out. That's a part of our spiritual jargon. But expanding then indicates that there's a unit of measurement that was here, and now that unit of measurement has gone to here. In other words, it has expanded. You can't say that or apply that to something that is, But we can say that about ourselves because you see, we are the micro of the macro. So we're the ones that the universe doesn't expand. We expand with regards to our access of that. And so on these steps that I want to climb you up on this morning, the first one is the understanding of that. And the words that are synonymous with infinite. So you heard Janet do her prayer, and typically we start the affirmative prayer with something like, there is one power, there is one presence, and we call that power and presence God. All of those words, power, presence, and God, are associated with that which is infinite. There's no measurement to the power. There's no measurement to presence. There's no measurement to our understanding of God because it is limitless, boundless, ageless, timeless, birthless, all those things. And so you could apply the same word, today's topic, to that wholeness. So there's only one wholeness, correct? You can't have two wholenesses. You can only have one wholeness. And so what becomes our experience of wholeness in the micro with regards to the wholeness that is the macro? What becomes your experience of wholeness? Is it somebody giving you the permission to be more whole? Is it some outside external force saying, okay, now you are worthy to be called more whole? It's what? It's you and I individually coming to these crossroads of awareness where we realize that, holy cow, I'm responsible for my potty mouth. I'm responsible for my wholeness. I'm responsible for my wholeness. No one else is. And so when I begin to understand that, then I can see that this trilogy of words that we always use, you are whole, complete, and perfect. Sometimes that annoys us, right? Because we go, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. You're whole, complete, and perfect. No, I'm not. I have flaws. These are my flaws. These are my wounds. These are my stories, and they're very sacred, and I want to hold true to them. And so when we do that, we are siphoning off or pinching off our access of that allness or that wholeness. So I'm only getting a margin of or a little piece of the whole, but I'm not really understanding the totality of wholeness. And I never will actually reach a finish line of wholeness, right? Day by day, self-awareness by self-awareness, spiritual practice by spiritual practice, I become a more of the wholeness that is. And so I want to understand what that actually means. So the truth is that you are whole, complete, and perfect, just like the macrocosm, because you are made in the likeness and the image of that. But the gift of free will tells us that we can deny that, or pinch that off, or resist that, or deny that, or be ignorant of that. And it still does not take away the validity that you are whole, complete, and perfect as your natural, innate, spiritual, soulful state. Is that clear? So that's what you are. You and I are wholeness to the degree that we understand it and play with it. To the degree that we begin to collaborate with that energy and begin to let go of anything that stands in the way of that. And we become more in alignment with wholeness. The Science of Mind textbook says, marvelous as the concept may be, it is nonetheless true that human beings have at their disposal in what's called subjective mind, a power that seems to be limitless. This is because we are one with the whole on the subjective side of life. Our thought, falling into this subjective mind, submerges with the universal subjective mind, and it becomes the law of our life. And through this one great law, all of life begins to exemplify itself. So we're there. We're at the portal of this limitless experience if we cooperate, if we're willing to do that. What stands in the way of that? Step two. Step two. Our brokenness. We love our brokenness because it's so juicy. So juicy. Did you hear my he done me wrong story? Well, sit down. Let's go to lunch because I want to tell you. And it's enthralling and it's seductive. It's seductive. And we find like-minded energies and vibrations who are willing to live life at that level of seduction. And so what happens is that we negate this wholeness. We don't understand it, and we stay locked into the brokenness. Now, this isn't about avoiding being broken, because what we understand in human form, that's a part of the migration or the evolution, that we will be broken. Things will happen to us. But we don't stay there. We move then from brokenness to what I like to call broken open. And I even put a chapter in my last book about this, and I had found this quote by a woman named Elizabeth Lesser. And she said, "It is the height of arrogance to prescribe a moral code or a health regime or spiritual practice as an amulet to keep things from falling apart." Things do fall apart. It is in their nature to do so. And when we try to protect ourselves from the inevitability of change, we're not listening to the soul. We are listening to our fear of life and death, our lack of faith, our smaller ego's will to prevail. To listen to your soul is to stop fighting with life. To stop fighting when things fall apart, when they don't go our way, when we get sick, when we are betrayed or mistreated or misunderstood. To listen to the soul is to slow down, to feel deeply, to see ourselves clearly, to surrender to discomfort and uncertainty, and then begin to wait. And I loved that passage because it was telling me that brokenness is not final if we do the work. Brokenness then becomes the launching pad into moving into something that we like to call broken open. Because you see, as we break open, we expand. There's that word. And it's us that is expanding. Again, it's not the whole or the universe that's expanding, because the universe is infinite. But now, in my migration of my wound, I'm now moving in letting that wound actually help me to be a helpmate into peeling away all of my religious wounding or religiosity or my separateness or my abandonment issues or my lack and limitation consciousness, all of those things that I carry with me that keep me stuck in the container of being broken. But if I free myself, if I start to listen, step one, if I begin to understand that, wait a minute, my core is whole, then I crack open and I expand. And I allow those experiences to then become my stepping stone into a deeper awareness. I used to have such grievances against the fundamentalist Christian church because that's how I was raised. It was like, get me as far away from that as possible. And then, of course, I would make them wrong. And in making them wrong, really what I was doing was I was carbon copying what I was observing happening there. So I was a very good carbon copier, rather than realizing that I get to bless that experience because that's where the divine discontent was birthed. I began to notice something too, that people who come here from those kinds of backgrounds, who stumble and fumble their way into new thought, are very different than people who were raised in new thought. Because I find that people who stumbled and fumbled their way here, they've been sort of gasping for breath. And they came in here and they came above water. And there's an appreciation. And sometimes when it's been a part of our lives, we tend to take it for granted. But when we find ourselves here, then we get that restorative breath back and we begin to listen. And I don't know about you, but do you remember your first time? Not that first time. The first time that you found this. The first time that you heard something different than how you were raised. Do you remember that? Do you remember when that first little layer was scratched away and you went, what? or you opened a book, or you heard a speaker, or you came across something. That was that resuscitation. That was the beginning of you moving from being broken to being broken open. And when that begins to happen, then that step is about remembering. The first step was about understanding what wholeness is. And the second step is about remembering that this migration is of value to me. It's a must. So when you think that you are separate, you are remaining in a state of brokenness. When you think that you are powerless, where there are things outside in the world that are going to govern the quality of your life, then you are living in a state of brokenness. When you and I think that we still need to be rescued, then we are remaining in a state of brokenness. There is no knight on a white horse who's going to come in and fix it all. It's not. Because you are the person writing into your own story. And you and I must begin to look at where we are doing that. We are creating an expectation where a mommy or a daddy or some other super force is going to come in and clean it all up. And as long as we remain in that particular vibration, we are actually remaining in the brokenness. And you may not realize it or not, but that's the way in which many of us are stalling our wholeness. So something happened in the sports world this week. Some team Cub thing, something happened. I love Joe Madden, their manager, because if you don't know this, Joe Madden is a meditator. He's an advocate of meditation. And so he actually hired former player Darnell McDonald to come in, who is also a meditator, and he gave him the title of Mental Skills Coordinator. And he taught his team, the Chicago Cubs, to meditate and to do yoga. And that's a part of their training. I don't know if you know that or not. That's a part of their training. And what Joe Madden would say to his players was, I don't ask you to be perfect. I ask you to be present. Do you see the difference? If I'm present, then I'm becoming broken open. I'm beginning to peel away all of the falsity. We always say this isn't about learning something. This is about unlearning something. And so I'm continuing to unlearn all of the garbage and the baggage and all the layers of clothes that I put on myself. And I'm becoming more present with regards to who I am, to what I am. I began to go back to step number one of understanding, and I go, wait a minute. My essence, my true nature is wholeness? Really? Then how willing am I to embark upon a path of allowing more of that day by day to come in to lead my decision making, to be the way in which I think and speak, particularly about myself? And so I look at the anxiety that is so prevalent right now, particularly in our country. And I was reminded of a very famous piece that was written by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She's the woman who wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves, if you've ever read that book. And she called this, You Were Made for This. You were made for this. I'm going to jump around a little bit here, but she says, my friends, do not lose heart. We were made for these times. I have heard from so many recently who are deeply and properly bewildered. They are concerned about the state of affairs in our world now. Ours is a time of almost daily astonishment and often righteous rage over the latest degradations of what matters most to civilized, visionary people. You are right in your assessments. The luster and the hubris some have aspired to while endorsing acts so heinous against children, elders, everyday people, the poor, the unguarded, the helpless is breathtaking. Yet I urge you, I ask you, gentle you, to please not spend your spirit dry by bewailing these difficult times. Especially, do not lose hope. Most particularly because the fact is that we were made for these times. Yes, for years, you have been learning, practicing, been in training for, and just waiting to meet on this exact plane of engagement. I grew up on the Great Lakes and recognized a seaworthy vessel when I see one. Regarding awakening souls, there have never been more able vessels in the waters than there are right now across our world. And they are fully provisioned and able to signal one another as never before in the history of humankind. Look out over the prow. There are millions of boats of righteous souls on the waters with you. Even though your veneers may shiver from every wave in the stormy rowl, I assure you that the long timbers composing your prow and rudder come from a greater forest. That long-grained lumber is known to withstand storms, to hold together, to hold its own, and to advance regardless. In any dark time, there is a tendency to veer toward fainting over how much is wrong or unmended in the world. Do not focus on that. There is a tendency, too, to fall into being weakened by dwelling on what is outside your reach, but what cannot yet be. Do not focus there. That is spinning the wind without raising the sails. We are needed. That is all that we can know. And though we meet resistance, we more so will greet those who will hail us, love us, and guide us, and we will know them when they appear. Didn't you say that you were a believer? Didn't you say that you pledged to listen to a voice greater? Didn't you ask for grace? Don't you remember that to be in grace means to submit to the voice that is greater? Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul. I got to repeat that line. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward an enduring good. And I jump forward a little bit, and she says, there will always be times when you feel discouraged. I too have felt despair many times in my life, but I do not keep a chair for it. I will not entertain it. It is not allowed to eat from my plate. The reason is this. In my uttermost bones, I know something, as do you. It is that there can be no despair when you remember why you came to earth, who you serve, and who sent you here. The good words we say and the good deeds we do are not ours. They are the words and the deeds of the one, or the whole, who brought us here. And in that spirit, I hope you will write this on your wall. When a great ship is in harbor and moored, it is safe. There can be no doubt. But that is not what great ships are built for. And so, step number 2 is remembering exactly what she said. First step, you have to understand what wholeness is in its relationship with you. And step number 2 then begins the remembering, or the reawakening, the breaking open, the migrating from our brokenness and our excuses into taking action. And the third step has to do with vigilance. And I'll tell you what vigilance around. There's a story in the book of Luke. If you remember, in biblical times, one of the worst things that would happen was to contract leprosy. Leprosy was the disease of the diseases during those biblical times. And if you contracted leprosy, you had to leave your family. You were put into a leper colony. And you were forbidden by law to engage or associate with any other human being within a certain amount of feet, because it was very contagious. And so in the book of Luke, it tells the story of how the master teacher, Jesus, was walking along the border. I believe it was Samaria and Galilee. And as he was walking, this group of 10 men with leprosy, cried out to him. They recognized who he was, and they cried out to him for mercy. Please, please, oh Lord, please, please heal me. Please help me. And so Jesus said this very short little thing. He said, rise up and go and see your priest. It's like, what? What he was saying was, rise up, go and now enter back into community, which you can do now. Go show your priest, go show your holy men that you are whole. And what happened was, is that when they looked down, they let out a squeal of delight because all of the leprosy, all of their skin had been restored. And they took off, except for one. One turned around and came back to Jesus and prostrated himself on the ground and began to express his gratitude. And he said, oh, Lord, have mercy on me. Thank you. Thank you. Several times in the storytelling or the allegories within the Bible, there's always that component where a mass is given something and only a margin or a small percentage will go back to the origin and express thanks for that. So you think 9 lepers took off. 1 leper turned around and said, thank you. And Jesus again uttered and he said, rise up. And he says, your faith has made you whole. Your faith has made you whole. Meaning that by being willing to accept and express gratitude for what you have now, you are now broken open to receive more of what wholeness is by means of you. And I think far too often, we're all guilty of being like the 9 lepers because we love instant gratification. Look, my spots are gone. And off we go. Look, my disease is gone. Look, my rent is paid. Look, someone answered my ad on Match.com. Look, something, there's instant gratification. And what happens is we run for that. And rarely, when we don't have it, do we actually physically or metaphorically fall down on our knees and just express thanks, whether you can see the wholeness or not. And so the third step is vigilance in our gratitude. Because a whole person, rise, for your faith has made you whole, is a person who expresses gratitude regardless. A person where the vibration of gratitude becomes as a way of life. And so we understand, we then remember and apply, and we become so grateful. I don't know about you, but I could never, when I was a young man, have designed this life that I'm experiencing right now. I could have never imagined when I was in that religious environment that I would come to this vector or this crossroad in my life where I would understand something so profound that it would deliver me, heal my leprosy thinking, that I can understand that regardless of what happens in this world, regardless what happens in an election, regardless what happens in a workplace, regardless of what happens in relationship, regardless what happens to the physical frame of this body, as long as I have my mind, I will know that I can go, I'll take some of that, and I'll take some of that, and I'll take some of that. And I will move into a greater state of wholeness, that of which heretofore I would have never experienced up until this present time. That is a message for a beginner. That is a message for a well-seasoned metaphysician, because wholeness does not have a finish line. And our experience of wholeness does not have a finish line. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't trade my position in life with what I understand and what I'm remembering. I wouldn't trade my brokenness because it led to such beautiful breaking open. And I would not trade my vigilant practice of gratitude for anything, because I can't wait to see what else is going to unfold. And I know that that's the truth for you as well. And so it is.
Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.